Hello, this is Wes Bridle, and this is another Kingdom Calling Economic Update video. This is the third of 3 videos focusing on Europe, and all of these videos are short updates, what's going on in the economy here recently, that I'll follow up on the Coming Storm video, which is a feature-length video about what's the big picture of what's going on in the economy and in the world over these times. So if you haven't seen that video, I really recommend you go see that. There's a link to go see that video for free right near this video. And let me jump in. Many think that Greece should just leave the euro. Of course, this puts Northern European banks in trouble and could tank all of Europe and the world. Germany's making plans to bail out their own banks, writing's on the wall. So the situation with, when I talked a little bit about this at the end of the last video, some people are wanting Greece to just leave the euro, which there's no real way that they can stay in the euro. Either way is not good. But if they do that, then everyone that owns Greek debt is going to take massive haircuts, and they're going to need huge bailouts. What's interesting is there's rumors that Germany is now preparing for this, that they're preparing to bail out all of their banks and do what they need to do to separate themselves. I've even heard a rumor that Germany and France are now preparing to have Deutschmarks and francs printed back up, so to totally leave. It'd be, I guess, smart for them to at least have that backup plan, even if they're not sure that they're doing it yet. And I'm going to talk about some thoughts on that in a minute. European bank risk of default is soaring, so all the European banks, the risk of default is measured in the credit default swap market is soaring. So they're all in bad shape, as we talked about. Italian government bonds are looking worse. Less buyers are showing up, and the yields are higher. That's important because Greece, Portugal, Ireland, those are really small economies, and so even though their own books are bad, they really could be easily bailed out by the more powerful countries. The problem is the situation in Italy and Spain is pretty similar to those countries, and their economies are massive. They're the third and fourth biggest countries, biggest economies in Europe, and there's no way the other countries can afford to bail them out. So when you see those European bond yields rising and you see less people showing up to buy them, that's an ugly, dangerous situation, and that would really be the nail in the coffin for the euro. The LIBOR, the interbank borrowing costs have exploded. Banks don't trust each other, and that's usually a sign that things are about to get ugly. If we look at 2008, what happened, that's one of the many things that happened that showed us things are about to get bad, because the banks refused to lend to each other because they didn't trust that the other bank would stay in business. Argentinian central banker, a former one, came out and said that Greece should default. It's the only way. It's nice to see him being honest. Most central bankers are really just politicians in a banker's suit, and they're not honest about anything. So Argentina is the king of defaulting, and their central banker, former central banker, came out and just said, hey, they need to default. It's better for them, which is true. That's what they should do. The Swiss government went crazy and pinned the Swiss franc to the euro. This means they're putting themselves in the position of being the buyer of last resort to an infinite amount of European debt. So I guess Switzerland is going to bail out all of Europe, even though Switzerland's a pretty tiny economy. Apparently they're willing to do it. If the market tests it, it makes it a scary thing. I've talked about the Swiss franc as being a safe currency, a safer currency to hold, but now this puts that greatly in jeopardy because they've said they will not be a safe currency, that they'd rather have a low currency like a lot of other countries are trying to do. So even though inherently they practice more conservative policies, which should give them a safer currency, in reality they've decided now that they're going to have a weak currency no matter what and pin it to 1.2 against the euro. Now it'll be interesting to see how much the market tests this, because the reality is there's no way, unless Switzerland decides to be Zimbabwe, they cannot buy an infinite amount of euro debt. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, but it certainly does, in my mind, take them off the list of countries I feel good about. What's sad is it's hard to find any country. There are countries that do good and safe things, and so I feel better about holding their currency. Yet when Switzerland, which is very high on that list, could all of a sudden make a pronouncement like this, the value of their currency dropped 10% in a day, what's to say any other country can't do exactly that? I've never considered the yen a strong currency that I want to hold, but the market has, and they've been doing these same sort of things over the last year or so, purposefully devaluing their currency. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. It's just an ugly situation, and nobody wins in a currency war. Let's see, a German court said the governments must approve future bailouts. It probably puts a stop to any of the past current one going through the parliaments this fall. So the court ruled, there's a big ruling, I think on September 7th, that they were not going to say all bailouts are illegal, even though really they are if you read the original treaties of the euro. But those courts didn't want to throw all of Europe immediately into chaos. So they said, okay, we'll accept those, but from now on, any bailouts that you do must go before the parliaments of the individual countries. Well, this puts a serious damper on any future bailing out, because it takes a long time to go to all the parliaments of all the countries, first of all. So even if all the people are all for it, if there's an emergency situation, which we're having more and more of, both in the US and Europe, then they need to bail things out quickly. But now what this court in Germany has said is the European government is going to have to go to each of the individual European governments and get bailouts approved. Of course, another problem is the people in these countries are getting more and more upset and thinking that they don't want to do this. So the politicians don't want to get thrown out of their positions, and so they're more and more saying, we can't approve that. There's the vote coming up here at the end of this month in Germany is going to be interesting, because a lot of the people in Merkel's own party, who are the controlling party in Germany, have said they're not going to vote with her. Now, they have differing allegiances, because Merkel is the leader of that party. It's kind of like when Bush was the president in America. He did a lot of really liberal things as far as spending. He spent money like crazy. He did the big bailouts right when this financial mess started. And the Republicans, even though that's kind of against their own philosophy, or supposed philosophy, they went with him because he was the leader of the party. And now many of them regret that. Well, it's a similar thing going on in Germany, where these people, now the vote hadn't happened yet, but some of them are saying, look, I just can't vote that way. It's against my conscience, it's against the will of the people that I represent. And so they're saying they're going to refuse to vote that way. My guess is, unless something big happens between now and then, most of the people in Merkel's parties and the related parties are going to go ahead and suck it up and vote with Merkel to approve this, because otherwise the coalition government's going to fall apart, and there'll probably be new elections, and they might lose a lot of power. So just like the U.S. had with the Republicans 3 years ago, there's probably a good chance they stick with it. But past this vote, I just don't think they're going to continue to vote in more bailouts. And that's what this German court has said must happen, which means all the situation is going to come to a head, I would say, at least within a year. And let's see. Slovakia doesn't even have this vote on this current EFSF bailout until December, and again, that may be too late. This is a really interesting thing I saw somebody put out. These 2 points make a deadly point for Europe. On one hand, to make radical change requires time and careful planning. If you're going to it took them 10 years to plan the Eurozone and to create the euro. Really, they've been working on it for like 50 years, but really with specific plans, it took about 10 years of planning to make such a radical change. Making big radical changes takes time and careful planning. But the problem is, if you alert the market that you're making these careful changes and plans and everything, then the market's going to react violently, and it could get ugly before you have time to put your plans in place. So if they alert people, which surely if you have enough people that need to be involved to make these plans, the market's going to find out, then there's going to be a banking system collapse, and you have the problems that you were trying to avoid. It's the catch-22 situation that Europe is in right now. Germany and Holland threatening Greece with no more bailouts if they don't comply to the austerity deal that's already been done. And Greece is threatening back if they don't get, I think it's 90% of the banks to agree to haircuts, then they're not going to continue with their austerity. At last number I saw is they had about 70% of the banks agreeing to it. So you got both sides threatening each other, and again, it's an ugly situation. The credit default swap rates on Greece, Italy, Spain, and France all hitting record highs, and Germany making plans for Greece to exit the Eurozone. So Germany is more and more saying, look, that's probably what needs to happen. So it's not often you see politicians being that honest, but at a certain point, politicians have to admit what the market sees as obvious. Thanks for watching these European videos. I'm going to move on to other subjects in the next videos. Again, if you haven't seen the Coming Storm video, there's a link to do so for free right next to this. Thank you for watching.